Hey guys, inevitably sound quality is going to be a little worse. Even picture quality is going to be a little bit worse because I'm filming this outdoors. But this is the sort of video when you're giving advice of this kind where, I don't know, it seems to me I should make the effort to not film in front of a plain white background. This kind of tree, if you're not already accustomed to living in the tropics of Asia specifically, might freak you out a little bit. Might freak you out a little bit more if they actually had some monkeys living in the trees out here. If you're lucky in Taiwan, you can live in an area with a lot of monkeys. And I'm just going to walk around the corner now to get out of the noise of the traffic. And yeah, you can see that tropical sun coming down and hit me. That's what makes the trees grow in the way that they do out here. All right. I wanted to say something right off the bat in this video in terms of how a white Western person is perceived in China right now. Year 2019, year 2020. Think of how Americans regarded immigrants from the Arab world, someone who just arrived from Saudi Arabia right after September 11th, 2001, right after terrorist attack. What were the attitudes towards Muslim and Arab immigrants in the United States and Canada? Now, I use this example judiciously. It is true that right now in 2019, it's not as if there has been some kind of obvious terrorist assault on China. But what you need to understand is, for them, from the Chinese perspective, for people living inside the propaganda machine of how Chinese history is taught, people who watch the news as it's told to them by the Xi Jinping government, they feel absolutely that their country is being imperiled by American imperialism right now to a much greater extent than Americans ever felt they were being imperiled by Muslim terrorist organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, it's easy to laugh at this. Don't. Was the United States of America in the past, historically, ever conquered or colonized by Arabs, by Muslims? Never. From the Chinese perspective, let's pause here to look at the gorgeous tree. Look at this. Full bloom. Look at these flowers. Look at this. Beautiful. Beautiful. Don't try to climb the tree. Look at these thorns. Living in the tropics, people. And these things come and go, by the way, with no particular season. It's not like this tree is only in bloom now because it's summer. This isn't summer. This is winter. Yeah, I didn't even mention that. This is winter in the tropics. There, I hope you can see some of those more beautiful flowers up there. This is winter in the tropics, but plants will bloom whenever they can. Fruit trees and flowering trees alike. There is no history of the United States being conquered or colonized by Arabs, by Muslims. And communist China, the way they teach history, they very much do have a history of being conquered and colonized by white Europeans and Americans. Now, you can complain that this is an exaggeration or this is unreasonable. Real simple question for you. Did Germany ever conquer and annex territory in China to set up colonies? Yes or no question. The answer is yes. Yes, they did. Germany had some colonies on the east coast of China. Did England ever annex territory from China and rule it as their own colony? Yes, they did. History of the American army invading China and looting the Emperor's Summer Palace. These things did happen. Now, does communist propaganda exaggerate and misrepresent that history and turn it into a kind of nationalist narrative to serve its own purposes? Yes, they do. What most Chinese people know about the history of their own country is, shall we say, falsifiable. And I had the experience of being in conversations with people there and trying to challenge what it is they think they know, what it is they presume about the history of their own country. They will say things like, China was humiliated by Western imperialism, meaning European and American imperialism. And you can ask questions like, why did China still have an emperor after it was quote-unquote conquered? Whereas India, after India was conquered by England, it had no emperor. Why is China still populated by Chinese people? whereas Australia is not populated by its own indigenous people. I mean, Australia is real genocide, the history of European imperialism in Australia. So on for Canada, the United States also, the formation of those countries, the kind of conquest, the kind of genocide you're talking about there. And, when I say those sorts of things to Chinese people who live inside the system, as I've been putting it, it's very hard for them to compute. But the level of hostility that now, in 2019, with current political conditions, even just the trade tensions and so on between, the United States and China, you have to keep in mind it has this historical background, this victim narrative that China was a great country destroyed by Western imperialism in the past, destroyed by the Opium Wars, so on and so forth. And the awareness that this can happen again. And I've already indicated this is kind of false and exaggerated, and it's communist propaganda in many ways. However, did anyone in the United States actually believe that the armies of ISIS had any chance whatsoever to conquer American territory? Like, did anyone think there was the military capacity in terms of tanks and soldiers and population backing the armies of ISIS that they could actually, say, conquer Nebraska, and that the United States would just have to hand over land, would have to hand over some territory? Maybe not even the whole of the United States, but that a chunk of American territory would become permanently occupied by ISIS or Al-Qaeda. No, that's ridiculous. That's unthinkable. Even though, of course, the conflict following after September 11th, emotionally was very real for Americans, and it definitely would have created a certain kind of hostility when the average white American after September 11, 2001 was meeting an Arab immigrant, any kind of ethnicity associated with Islam, someone just arrived from Saudi Arabia, so on and so forth. So the nature of the threat posed by the American empire to the Chinese empire, to communism, to the Chinese worldview, so on and so forth, in some ways, it's much more real than any threat that was posed by September 11, 2001. And as indicated, in some ways, it is much more of a peculiar and ghostly apparition.